we have this course has around 22, I think, students. It's an elective course, as you know. But we may have some other students because we announced through our university and through our friends, and we may have some of our job coaching group members. I think Feryal will be joining, though she has a lecture. Yes, she will try.
Yes, I think I saw her name. Good morning, Feryal.
Good morning, Feryal Hoca. Good. And Didem will be joining. Didem, who is already, like, she is already working in another university. She started to work in government university.
Good.
And she will be with us. And some others, Elif and Güzin probably will be with us. Okay, we'll be very happy. Now we are 28.
Okay. So, will I go ahead and start?
Maybe we can start.
Okay, well,
please,
first
you are welcome. But let me introduce you.
Okay.
Yes, please. I will talk about later on.
Good morning, Christy and Serap Hocam. I'm
Good
sorry
morning.
for interruption. Good morning.
Very nice. Yes.
Ali İhsan, my name is Ali İhsan bilir.
İhsan Bey, merhaba. Very nice
Merhaba.
to hear you. I can see you now, but nice to hear you. And Ferit Hoca also.
Thank you. Yes, you're right.
Short explanation to our students. How come we all know each other, and we had this gathering. Christy Lynch is the architect of our job coaching course.
Serap Hoca'ya giremiyorum davetli diye mesaj gönderdi.
Kameraya basabilir misiniz videoya? Resminiz, sesiniz geliyor, video gözükmüyor. Ali İhsan Hoca siz değil, Feride Hoca'nınki gözüküyor.
Onunla temas ediyoruz şu anda. Görüntüsü kapalı.
Görüntünüzü açabilirsiniz. Ses geliyor. Sesiniz geliyor ikinizin de. Sadece kamera var şu aşağıda. Mikrofonun yanında kamera. Oraya basabilirsiniz. Kırmızı bir çizgi oluyor üstünde. Veya böyle katılın. Yani siz görebiliyorsunuz değil mi ekranı?
Evet, biz görüyoruz. Ben görüyorum. Evet.
Tamam. Bir şeyde ilerlerken kameranızda kamerada bir sıkıntı var. İçten açılmıyor.
Good morning.
Good
How
morning.
are you? How do you do? Christy.
Good morning. I just woke your son.
Yes, this is very nice. Yeah. How are you? How do you do?
I'm very well. I'm very well, thank you.
Very well.
How do you cope with? So we are working hard.
Good.
Yeah.
We're all coping, somehow we're all coping with COVID.
This is the very nice organization, Serap Hocam.
Yes, thank you. Because of our students. Because of our students, we made
Merve'yi bir daha çağırsın ama.
Thanks to the students also.
Much for Christy and for you to join. So this is our, dear students, this is our job coaching group. We had a project, and after this project, Erasmus project, and after project, we had this nice, very nice friend. Though we know each other, Christy just gathered us under the job coaching group, and we have learned a lot from him. Now from him, and now you will see why we liked him, why we love him that much, and why we feel ourselves very much friendly. He is very much friendly. And I'm sure you will feel the same at the end of this lecture. You are very much dear Christy Lynch. And can you please start for your presentation so you won't take much of your time?
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody, and greetings from a very, very cold Ireland. It's still early in the morning here, so it's dark. So I'm hoping that you can see me okay, but I have the lights on. I thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity to share some ideas with the students. And the first thing for me is I'm very delighted that Turkey now has a course like this, an elective that students can take, because as you'll hear me say, having people with good knowledge in education is really, really essential to developing these ideas. What I want to do this morning is I know, Sarap, you've covered some of the model, but I want to do, if you like, a quick update or a quick overview of what we're talking about, what is supported employment. And then I want to take Ireland as an example of how do you develop an idea like this in your own country. Not that Ireland is perfect, we're not, we still have a lot more to do, but I think we've made some very good progress over many, many years. I'm now retired, so I'm looking back now and realizing just how hard it's been, but at the same time, how worthwhile it has been to make the progress that we have made. And hopefully from that, you can take some ideas that you can develop in Turkey. The other thing, if we have time, I've never done this on Zoom before, so I'm not sure how the time will flow. If I have time, then I would like to talk a little bit. Okay. Then I would like to, Ali, you need to turn your microphone up. Yeah. So if we have time, what I would like to do is talk a little bit more about employers. Sarap, I've lost your photograph, but I'm assuming people can still see me. Can you still hear me? Yes. Yes. Okay. So if we have the time, I will talk a little bit more about how do you approach employers? How do you convince employers to open their doors to people with disabilities? The reason I picked that is because it's probably the area in my experience that people working in this field are most challenged by and most scared by. I suppose it's not something that within the disability movement or within the social care movement, we would have thought we would be doing a lot of, which is dealing with the corporate world. So to start then, we're talking about a methodology or a model called supported employment. And the first thing to say about supported employment is that it is based on an inclusion foundation. So we come from the perspective of full inclusion for people with disabilities. As I'll say later, unfortunately, that is not the reality for most people with disabilities. They remain outside of the labour market and often outside of the education system in segregated facilities. So if you are one of those people who think segregation is a good thing, you will not like pretty much anything that I'm about to say over the next hour and a half. So if we're not looking at this from the point of view of social inclusion, then you are not doing this properly, is the simple message. The second element of the model is people are paid real wages and benefits associated with the job. So we are not in the business of providing cheap labor to the labor market. We want people with disabilities to go out there, be employed like you or I would be employed, and to be paid whatever the going rate is for that job. Over the years, I've had many people who earn minimum wage, but lots of people who've earned more than minimum wage because they were in jobs that paid better. The other thing not to forget about is what are the benefits associated with the job? So benefit might be that there's a good pension package, or that they, if you work in the retail sector, that you get a discount if you work there, et cetera, et cetera. So what are the other benefits as well as wages that are associated with the job? The third element key to supported employment is that it is for people with all levels of disability. And over my years working, this has been an area that's very important to me and very close to my heart, because with many of the approaches, what happens is we filter out. We say, okay, those people who are more capable, who have disabilities that are mild disabilities, yeah, we can find them jobs. But for those people with more moderate or more severe disabilities, then they won't be able to do this. Well, we don't agree with that. We believe that the issue is, if you want to go to work, you can go to work. And it's our problem to figure out how you're going to do that, what the right job will be. And we should not blame the person with disability. We should see this as an issue for us that we have to figure out. To give you one example, I worked with a young man many years ago who was labeled profoundly intellectually disabled. He used a wheelchair, he had no speech, he needed help with feeding, he needed to be toileted, and he ended up working in a local library, doing a very simple job, opening the books and sticking a label inside the book where they would stamp the date when you return it. With technology now, I'm sure that job has moved on, but it's just an example of a real job that was very simple, that needed to be done, that somebody with very complex needs was able to do, and the library were happy to pay him. So that's really, really important, that we don't only work with people who have mild disabilities, that we really are working with all levels of disability. The next point is placement first. So I'm not sure what your course is called. I think, you know, we'll talk a little bit about place, train, and maintain. Or in today's language, I often say, how do we help people to choose the right job? Then how do we help the person to get the job? And how do we help the person to keep the job? So choosing the right job, getting the job, and keeping the job. Placement first. This is what really separates supported employment from the more traditional approaches. I spent many years as an occupational therapist trying to find jobs for people, and we always started with training, not with placement, with training. And we failed miserably is the simple way of putting that, because while we did very good training and we did teach people skills, the reality was the vast majority of those people never got anywhere near the labor market. So you could argue that we wasted a lot of our time and a lot of their time. So unless people actually get a job, you have to question, why are we doing this? So with this model, that's clearly focused. So you start with the placement and then you start thinking about the training, etc. We need to be flexible in the support we provide. No two people are the same. And over all my years, people say things to me like, oh, how do you find the right job for people with Down syndrome? And I usually answer that by saying, well, how do you find the right job for people with blue eyes or people who wear glasses? Because it's a stupid question, really. No two people are the same. You know, if what one person with Down syndrome would choose to do is very different to what the next person will choose to do. So you've got to be individual and you have to be flexible in terms of the kind of support you give. We've had people who actually were able to do the job quite well, but they were extremely anxious, very nervous about being in a new place. And what they needed a lot of was emotional support. Other people needed a lot of support around learning the actual job. There were other people who needed support with travel. How do they get to the job? So the type of support we give has to be absolutely tailor-made to the individual. The other key element of this is informed choice. So it shouldn't be just about, here's a job we found for you and you go there and stay there. We really should be working with people, and I'll talk a little bit later about the important role of schools in order that young people with disabilities are thinking about what are the different options out there. The great thing about the labor market is there are hundreds of thousands of jobs, and we will get through COVID and those jobs will come back again. And we should be supporting people to be informed and to know what the different jobs involved and what might be a good option for them. I have changed my career several times over the years, and I'm sure many of you listening to this will also do the same. And the same should be true for people with disabilities. So how do we ensure that people can have an informed choice? Other features of the model I've mentioned already. It's individualized, so you're always working with the individual. It's tailor-made support package. Initially, it is labor intensive, and this is one of the challenges, I suppose, particularly for government. So you don't see very large numbers of people very quickly becoming employed. It is labor intensive, but you've got to look at that in the medium to long term. And over time, and we have the data and the research now to show that this is a very effective way of addressing the issue of the unemployment of people with disabilities. Always remember that the goal is social inclusion. So even if you find a job for somebody and if they are being paid well, if they continue to be socially isolated, then we have not reached our goal. Part of the reason we're doing this is to ensure that people are socially included. I don't know about in Turkey at the moment, but because of COVID, lots of people are working from home. And there are people calling into the radio station saying how difficult it is, how much they miss being with their colleagues, how much they miss going to the office, etc., etc., etc., for a whole variety of reasons. We are social beings, and so it is important not ever to forget the goal of social inclusion. A key feature of the model, again, that separates it out is this use of job coaches. So somebody who will go with the person with disability and figure out what it is they need to learn and help them to learn those skills on the job. And we always have two customers. One, the obvious customer is people with disabilities. And the second customer is employers. And notice I'm using the word customer. And in English, that has a very particular meaning because customers have rights, customers have to be respected, customers should be supported. And those of us who have been running companies or businesses, you're always conscious about meeting the needs of your customers. So we see the employer as a customer, not as a problem, not as a difficult barrier, but a customer. And we are striving all the time. Covey talks about win-win, working for a win-win. How do we get to a situation where this works for people with disabilities, but it has to also work for companies? And employers have learned, and I have so many examples of this in so many countries, that this is a really good untapped resource. And people with disabilities in the right job make very, very good employees, and it's good for business. So what we're trying to sell, and if I have time, I'll come back to this, we're selling the idea of employers and disability being good for your business. Are people still with me? Can you still hear me?
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So I'm moving on to the definition. So the definition that I've always used is supported employment enables individuals with disabilities, including those with significant disabilities, to be employed in real jobs, in regular settings, where training and other supports are provided on an ongoing basis. There are many definitions of supported employment. I like that one for a number of reasons. One, it talks about enablement. Secondly, the word individual with disabilities in there. So we're not talking about groups of people, we're talking about individuals. The word significant disabilities. So we get that point of it being for all people who want to go to work. Real jobs in regular settings, and then training and other supports. So moving on, what's important here is the sequence of those events. So we start with placement, as I've said, then we start looking at training. It's very hard to figure out exactly what a person with disability is going to need in a particular job. And Mark Gold many years ago said, you never know until you get there. And I have learned that so many times over so many years. No two jobs are the same. No two McDonald's are the same. No two any employment situations are the same. Companies have their own culture. They have their way of doing things. They have their way of interacting with people. And people with disabilities going into that situation have got to learn those things. We also have to learn those things if we're the job coach. So you can't figure that out without getting on site. So we do the training, and I've been accused over the years of being anti-training. That's not true. I think training is absolutely important, is absolutely essential. The difference I'm stressing here is what you train and where you train it. So train people in the skills they need to know on the job. I say need to know because I spent so many years training people in things that I thought they would need to know, or I thought they might need. Remember, in most of my career, I was dealing with people who have a learning difficulty. And I spent so many years teaching them things that they never needed to use or they never needed to know before I started to do supported employment. So never forget that. Training is really important, but it's also important to know what to train and where to train it. And then hopefully you've done your really good job finding the right job, teaching people the skills they need to learn. Then you get into maintenance. So how do we ensure that they stay in the job? So I know there are people at the moment, certainly here, who because of COVID have maybe been laid off. So they will need us to go back in and re-engage with those companies and get them back into their jobs, hopefully. And if not into the jobs they've left, then into a new job, and we start the process again. So place, train, and maintain in that order. So what is this about? It is about a new mission. The first thing in this new mission is about choice for people with disabilities. And I would add another word there now, which is control. So we've spent a lot of time in Ireland now talking about choice and control. The last thing I did before I retired was to chair a government task force on, I don't know if it's been talked about in Turkey, but here, it's big discussions about what are called personal budgets or individualized budgets. And this is about moving the agenda, and instead of giving the money to professionals and to service providers, giving the money directly to people with disabilities, or giving the money directly to a family and saying, here's the money that the state was going to pay. How do you want to use this? Now, you don't just hand them a check and say, have a nice time. They do have to come up with a plan, and they have to learn how to do that. But some families have become so frustrated with service providers, organizations like the one I used to run, that they're saying, you know what? We think we could do a better job ourselves. So just give us the funds and allow us to figure out what's right for our daughter or what's right for our son, and we'll come up with a plan, and we will use the money in a way that makes sense for us. That's a movement that's very strong now in Europe, and the key components of that are about choice and control. And if you think about supported employment, there's a very good marriage between those two things. So that is the ultimate choice if you actually control the money. And many people with disabilities have said this to me. Yeah, I like you, Christy, and I like the fact that you're going to provide me with a job coach, but I would like it better if I was holding the purse strings, because that's what gives people control. When you have the control of the money, you have control of a lot of things. So remember, choice and control. The other thing we're trying to achieve here is satisfaction. So many people with disabilities, having gone to work, will tell you, I feel better about myself. I feel I'm part of society now. I feel I'm appreciated, I'm worthwhile. And I've had that story told to me by so many individuals. So many parents have relayed that back to me about their son or their daughter, that we should never underestimate that this is very satisfying. I spent the last 30 years of my career going around the world trying to persuade people to do this. Why? Because it makes such a profound difference in the lives of people with disabilities. That's why. Full inclusion. How do we ensure that people really are included? And finding a job and becoming part of the labor market is a really effective tool for achieving inclusion. Many of you will make friends in college that will become friends for life. I'm still friendly with people. We just had our 40-year occupational therapy reunion. You're getting an idea of my age now. And I'm still connected with people who I got to know through my career and maintain those relationships and those friendships over many, many, many years. So a job and your career is one of the ways in which you get connected. So I got to know Serap and Ali and lots of people in Turkey, and I still have those relationships now, and in many other places across the world. So don't underestimate the importance of relationships, friendships, and that network that enriches your life, and the fact that your job or having a job opens many of those doors for you. We should be talking much more about careers for people with disabilities and not just jobs. And I make this mistake myself. I've been talking about jobs, jobs, jobs. We really should be talking about careers, because if we're working with young people with disabilities, and hopefully you will be, you know, most of us don't start at age 22, 25 and stay in the same job. Particularly nowadays, if you talk to people in career development, they will tell you that most young people will change their career, will go in a different direction. So I was an occupational therapist for many years. I then moved into management. I then became a chief executive. So the same should be true for people with disabilities. So it's not about saying, oh, we got that guy a job or we got that girl a job and now we can forget about them. They're sorted. Let's move on. They will probably start to, in maybe a year, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, start to think, maybe I could do something different. Maybe I would like to do something just for a change. Many of us have done that. Helping people with disabilities to make a contribution. Unfortunately, in many societies, people with disabilities are portrayed as charity cases, as people who draw on society, as people who have to be taken care of, and they're not seen as people who are valued and who contribute. And finding work for somebody and getting somebody into the labor market where they clearly are making a contribution, paying their taxes, changes the perspective in society of how we envision and how we think about people with disabilities. And that's absolutely critical. If we're ever going to achieve full equality and full inclusion, we've got to help ordinary people to think about disability in a different way. And employment is a very, very good way of doing that. If you go to the supermarket here in Ireland now, in almost every situation, you will see somebody with disability working there. And that not just supermarkets, in lots of different places. And subconsciously, that's sending a message to ordinary people, oh, these folks can do the same things as you and I and can make a contribution to our society. So again, don't underestimate that. Self-determination. If you have a job, if you have money, so you can start to determine other things in your life. I've had many interesting conversations with parents who are quite shocked to discover maybe that their son or daughter, having improved their self-confidence and now have money in their pocket, say, I think I'd like to get my own apartment. So one of the projects that I had running just before I retired was a thing called In Control. So we were supporting young people with intellectual disabilities to actually maybe share an apartment with another person or go and find their own apartment and move out of home and be more independent. They would never have done that had they not gone to work. And they probably wouldn't have been able to do it anyway, because unless their parents were in a position to provide the finances. So this leads on to other things. And ultimately, we're trying to support people with disabilities to live the life that they want to live. Not the life that their parents have decided they'd live, but the one that they want to live. Sometimes that is the same thing, but sometimes it's not. And how do we support people to do that? All of this is about giving people a better quality of life. A friend of mine said to me years ago that those of us who are involved in disabilities were involved in life-wasting programs. And I looked at him, I said, what do you mean? He said, by keeping people segregated, by keeping people doing boring things every day, by ensuring that people don't go to work and don't earn a salary, we effectively are facilitating them to waste their lives. I never wanted to be involved with that. And I'm sure, and I hope none of you want to be involved with that. So we've got to find other ways, and supported employment is one of those other ways that opens up all these opportunities for people, ultimately to facilitate lifestyle change. I've had people at 55 years of age go to work for the first time. It's never too late. And people said to me, I remember one particular individual and the staff were saying to me, Christy, she's 55 years old. People retire at 55 years of age. And I said, yes, but listen to the lady. She wants to go to work. She's not asking you to retire. She's never been to work. She wants to go. So what? She's 55. We just had, it reminds me, yesterday all over the news, the very first person outside of a trial to be vaccinated for COVID is an Irish woman. And she is 91 years of age next week, but she only finished work about 4 or 5 years ago because she liked working and she continued to work well into her 80s. So we shouldn't be fixing ages and telling people that they can't do things. If somebody has never had the opportunity and they want to go to work, then I don't see age as being a barrier. So let me move on to talk about, so they're all, I think you will agree, the right things to be doing, nice things to achieve for people with disabilities. But unfortunately, for so many people with disabilities, that is not the reality. And I want to tell you the story of how we went about taking this idea and trying to make it available initially to more people in Ireland, and then moving on from there across the EU and other places. So I started with this back in 1987. Again, you now know how old I am. So And at that time, I had been in the United States for something else entirely. And while I was there, I heard people talking about this idea of supported employment. And of course, I thought, oh, this is just Americans, you know, calling something some fancy term. But luckily, I decided to go and have a look at it. And I was couldn't believe what I saw. And I was looking at people with intellectual disabilities, some of whom had quite significant intellectual disabilities, out there working in places like Pizza Hut or in hotels. And I was like, how the hell did they do this? And I decided to find more about it and try and bring that idea back to Ireland. So that was back in 1987. So we had no knowledge of this idea of supported employment. We never heard of a job coach. We didn't know anything about these ideas. We had a record unemployment. So back in the 80s, if you look back at our economy, and I'm hearing more about the Turkish economy these days, I have somebody staying here with me who's Turkish, and we have had many conversations about your economy. But back in the 80s, when I started with this in Ireland, we had record unemployment. And the official figure was 18%. Now, it was much higher than that, but governments always try to portray the best figure they can. And our official figure at that time was 18%. So I started talking about this idea from the United States and speaking at conferences, and people were standing up and saying, Mr. Lynch, are you crazy? Do you not understand that we have a massive problem of unemployed, non-disabled people? So if non-disabled people can't get a job, how are disabled people going to get a job? You're crazy. So we didn't listen to that. We said, well, people with disabilities have just the same right to have a job as people who don't have a disability. So we just needed to fight harder and try harder in what was absolutely a very challenging economic time. I began with a day centre, not a sheltered workshop. And in Ireland, if you go to a day centre, that's for people with more severe disabilities. So from my very beginning with this, my involvement included people with severe disabilities. And I'll tell you the honest answer. The reason we started with people with more severe disabilities wasn't because we were philosophically enlightened. It was because nobody wanted to work around employment with those people. Everybody believed that if you had a severe disability, it was not possible for you to go to work. And in fact, we wouldn't allow those people join our own sheltered workshop because we felt they weren't able enough for the sheltered workshop. So think about that. And then you have this crazy guy, me, coming back from the United States saying, I think all those people could go to work. And people laughed. Fortunately, the European Union at that time were looking for what they called innovative projects or new ideas. And they had quite a large amount of money available. So I went to my boss and said, I think we should take this idea, supported employment, and I think we should apply for some of that innovative funding. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, Christy, off you go, write the project if you want to. And so I went away and met with a colleague and we wrote a project proposal and we sent it off to Brussels and then forgot about it. And about 9 months later, I got a phone call from my boss and he said, get your backside over to my office now. And I thought, well, what have I done wrong now? Because he's obviously not happy. And when I got there, he showed me this letter from the European Union. He said, look what happened. I said, what happened? They turned down the project. He said, no, they didn't turn it down. They've agreed to the project and they're giving us all of the money that you looked for. And I said, well, this is great. And he said, well, you can forget about being an occupational therapist now. He said, because you've got us into this mess and you can get us out of it. So you're going to run this project. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. And that's how we started, with money from the EU for a project. Now, I know there are some similar stories in Turkey because in my early visits to Turkey, I worked with some people there to write a project proposal. And again, Turkey started with a, if I'm correct, Serap, a small project with a small number of people. But the important thing is to find a way to start, because success breeds success. And once you start something, and once you have good examples, and you have good examples in Turkey, you're able to build on those. You're able to bring it to the political system. You're able to show other families and get people to understand that this is not some crazy pie in the sky idea. This is actually possible to achieve for, in your case, citizens with disabilities in Turkey. So we went on from that initial project, and I started, because I have a big mouth, being Irish, and I talk a lot. So I started to go to seminars and go to meetings and talk about this project we were running with EU funding about supported employment. And other people, not everybody, there was a whole lot of people who laughed and said, oh, you're crazy. It'll never work. And then we had some other people who said, you know what? How are you doing this? Can you come and tell us a little bit more? And people around the country, and we're a small country, started to hear about us. And some of those people, not everybody, but some of those people were interested enough to say, we'd like to know more. In those early days, it was almost exclusively intellectual disability. So it was hard in those days to get people in the physical disability area or people in the mental health area to engage with this idea. That reflects the situation across the world. So even in the United States, where this started, the majority of the people supported tend to be people with intellectual disabilities. That's not a problem, it's just the way it is. And in more recent years, and certainly here in Ireland, now we have more physical disability organizations and a lot more mental health organizations now involved in promoting supported employment. One of the things that was important with those early people was high energy levels. When you try to do something different and you challenge the status quo and you're promoting a different approach, the people who are doing that need to be ready for an uphill battle. And you've got to have high levels of energy. You've got to be passionate. You've got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And that is wearing at times and it's frustrating at times. But when you get there, it is well worth the fight. We spent a lot of time promoting the concept, and explaining to people what exactly this is. Because remember, it was new and people just didn't understand. And sometimes people think they understand what you're talking about, but they actually don't know what you're talking about. So it is really important to be doing what you're doing now, learning, going to lectures, reading about it, learning from the experience in other countries, and promoting the idea, in your case, in Turkey. And the other key element from those early days was training. So we flew people in from the United States. We flew in professors and experts and all kinds of people in order to build our own knowledge and our own skills. I, as you probably know from Serap, have been to Turkey, I think 5 times at this stage, and I've been to many, many places. And the reason for that is to try and bring knowledge and bring expertise. And I'm very, very happy now that you now have Turkish expertise and Turkish knowledge and Turkish examples of how this works in practice. But the more people, the more job coaches you have, the more people who understand the concept, the more training that you're able to provide, then the more this will grow and develop. So what have we achieved in terms of all of this? One is national awareness. So as I said, we made a point of offering to speak at conferences, going to seminars, running our own seminars, going to speak to politicians, going to parent groups, going to anybody who would listen to us, frankly, and talk about this approach. Because once people hear about it, as I said, not everybody, but some of those people will say, actually, there's something in this. And so raising awareness is important. What was essential and what really was critical for us was raising the awareness of parents. Most of the resistance I experienced, unfortunately, in the early days, came from professionals, people who I expected should know better. And most of the support and most of the interest I got were from parents or people with disabilities themselves who were saying, I want something better for my kid. This sounds like a better way forward. Can you tell me more, please? In the early days, we developed a diploma in supported employment. You can now go on and get a degree. And I'm assuming most of you who are listening to this are in the process of getting your degrees, and you're doing this as part of it. So again, really important, because for this to be taken seriously, groups like the universities have to understand its potential. And thankfully, you're very fortunate there that your universities now see this and see the potential of this to make a difference. Active involvement at the EU level. So one of the things we decided to do was to say, who else is interested in this? how can we get more connected with what's going on in other countries? So we got very active in the European Association of Service Providers, for instance. Actually, the first time, I think, Serap, I'm right, the first time I went to Turkey was because one of my colleagues in the European Association had met with Serap, who had got involved with the European Service Provider Organization, and they suggested that I go to Turkey. So that networking is really important. I went on to develop a European organization just on supported employment. So there's now a group called the European Union of Supported Employment. And if you're looking for more information or handbooks or literature, if you Google EUSE, European Union of Supported Employment, there's lots of materials and information there. That now has members in more than 20 countries across the world. We went on to be involved with our American colleagues and some colleagues in Australia to develop a World Association on Supported Employment. We've held a World Association conference already. The next one will be in Canada. So I'm just giving you an example of how this thing can grow and grow and grow. But it requires effort, and it requires strategy, and it requires you to think big in order to get there. So we now have good professional associations right across the world who are able to speak with authority on the potential of this, but more importantly, not just to speak about it, to demonstrate it, to show people, to give examples, and to tell the success stories. What are the influencing factors to making this work? The first one is having people with a high level of knowledge and skill. So it's one thing to understand the concept, but we need to practice what we preach, and you learn best by doing this. So people learn best on the job, and the more people you find jobs for, then the more job coaches that are out there, then the more skilled we become at doing this. So having people with high levels of knowledge and skills is important, and you're well on the road to doing that, the very fact that you're taking this course. Clarity of purpose. So many people over the years said, oh, why don't you become part of this group or be part of that group? We decided, no, we are just going to promote supported employment. And we do work with other groups who are involved in other things, but we have kept the focus on this is about a particular strategy, a particular methodology, a particular model, and it's important to keep that clarity and be clear about what it is you're trying to achieve. We need to believe in the philosophy and the values. And the philosophy, as I said at the outset, is all about inclusion. It's about equality, and it's about choice and control for people with disabilities. And if you don't support those values, and if you don't keep those high in your agenda, you are not going to do this well. We need to have strategic relationships, and we need to develop those relationships and nurture those relationships. I never thought I would spend so much time at the Irish Parliament, but I ended up spending so much time there because it became important to try and get the political system engaged with this idea. I realized after many years of talking at conferences, giving lectures, doing this work day in, day out in the organization I ran, that wasn't enough. And if we really want this to have effect, then the decision makers need to be engaged. And decision makers, some of the decision makers, are the political people. And how do you get them to start making better decisions about what they decide to fund and what they decide to support when it comes to the employment of people with disabilities? One of the great frustrations I discovered for the political people is they're always being, I suppose, criticized for not doing enough around the issue of disability. And a former Prime Minister said to me one day, he said, Christy, we are trying, and no matter what we do around employment, or we try to do around employment, nothing seems to work. And one of the reasons we were successful with our political system was we were able to show them good examples. And they began to realize, actually, here's something that works. And as one of them said to me, if you can prove to me that this is working, I will happily fight for this in Parliament, and I will happily get more money. And that actually happened here. So I'm not talking about something that might happen. We actually achieved that. And we were the first country in Europe to have a national strategy on supported employment with job coaches all over the country in every area funded by the state. So in a nutshell, we need to offer solutions that work. It's very easy to go into anybody and be negative and be critical and to pick holes and to say what's wrong about something. That's not where the skill lies. The skill lies in saying, here's how to fix it. Here's a way forward. Here's something that will actually work and make a difference. And here's the data to support that. So what are the current issues? Well, for me, one of the current issues is to go back to basics. And the basics is place, train, and maintain. There are lots of theories now, and there are examples of customized employment, and people are calling supported employment different things now. But for me, what worked for us 30 years ago still works today. Focus on the individual, figure out what it is they want to do, help them to find that job, and provide ongoing support. It's as simple and as complicated as that. So keep the basics in mind. Another issue is unity is strength. To achieve real employment for people with disabilities is a massive undertaking across the world. But just think about Turkey. I would suspect, without knowing your numbers, probably about 80%, if you're like most other countries, of people with disabilities are unemployed or underemployed today. That's a lot of people. And in order to kind of address that scale of an issue, you need to work with other people. So who are the people who are working on equality? It might be the women's movement. It may be, parent groups. Who are the other people out there who are trying to promote better equality within society? So at one point I became the vice chair of the Equality Authority of Ireland, not because I was particularly passionate, although I became particularly passionate about full equality. My initial interest was only disability. But I began to realize that many of the issues that we're struggling with in disability are issues that were addressed, in our case, with the traveller community, with the gay rights movement, with some of the religious groups in our country. So where are the groups of people where you have something in common with? And it may not be the obvious thing like disability. It may be that struggle for fairness and equality. So unity is strength. And the more people you have working together towards something, the better. Big picture connectedness. So when I started, I was just interested in starting a small project, and we did that. And then I tried to get a national group together, and we did that. But I very quickly started to realize that this isn't just a problem for Ireland. This is a global problem in terms of the unemployment of disabled people. And so that's why I became very involved at EU level. And that's why we now have a world association, because, I've worked in places like South Africa, in South Korea, in lots of different economic realities, and we've been able to make these ideas work in very different cultures and in very different economies. So what's the big picture here? Another current issue is the benefits trap. Most places I go, the government gives some kind of a disability benefit, and very often the reason you get the benefit is because you're not able to work, or the common wisdom is you're not able to work. And if you do get a job, the first thing they'll do is take the benefits away from you. So one of the things we've worked on for many years, and we now have a more flexible benefit system, you can now be on partial benefit in Ireland. So you can start a job part-time and gradually decrease the amount of benefit that you have and increase the amount of earning that you have. And for some people, they will just have a combination of both. So they will have some benefit and some of their own earnings. So how do you get your system to that level? This is always a challenge particularly for the public servants, because they're always concerned that you're paying people with social welfare, and at the same time they're earning money. But how do you make that work? And the big one is, of course, where are people with disabilities? Where are adults with disabilities today? Most of them, sadly, are still in sheltered workshops or in day centers for people with more severe disabilities. And the result of all of that is they are segregated. They are not out there doing what you and I are doing every day. They are not mixing, by and large, with society. For many people, they get on a bus that comes to their home in the morning, they're brought to a special center, They stay in that center most of the day. Maybe they go out for lunch, maybe they don't. And then they go back into the special bus and back home. And that's their life, a life of segregation and limited contact with society. We shouldn't be surprised then that many people who don't have any direct contact through a family member with disability have very outdated attitudes and are very misinformed about the reality of the potential of people with disabilities. So we've got to break this cycle of segregation. Segregation is not a good thing. I mentioned I've done quite a bit of work in South Africa, and if you want to learn about segregation, go there. And people told me some unbelievable stories that, you know, even though I knew they were true, I found hard to believe because people were treated so differently. Why? Because the color of their skin was different. What happened during the Second World War, people because of religion. In my own country, thankfully we have a peace process now, but for many years, people in this country murdered each other on the basis of different religions. So where we start to treat people, human beings, differently based on one single characteristic and segregate them and treat them different to other people because of that one characteristic, bad things happen. That's what history teaches us. So I make no apologies for the fact that I do not agree with segregation. I understand why it happened. I understand that it is still the reality for lots of people. However, we need to do something about that. And we need to not be apologetic about the fact that that is a problem. And in order to address that problem, we've got to start doing new things. The definition of stupidity, we say in English, is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And for many years, unfortunately, that's what we've done with employment and disability. We keep doing the same thing over and over and thinking that somehow it's going to work the next time. We need something different, and supported employment is a different way of going about this. What kind of opportunities are out there to be positive? We have in Europe what's called an EU directive with regard to employment, and it talks about reasonable accommodation, that employers are required under European law to accommodate people with disabilities within the workplace. And so that has been an important driver in Ireland in, again, working with government and working with the employer community, not to beat them up with that, but to say, you know what, that isn't actually that difficult to do. And we have people, i.e. job coaches, who understand reasonable accommodation and who can work with you to implement that. Most of the member states in Europe, all of the member states in Europe actually, develop what are called national action plans on employment. Now, these are originally developed in order to promote the economy across Europe, and they were not specific to disability. But one of the things we did many years ago is we lobbied at European level and said, you should write into the guidelines for the national action plans on employment that there should be something in there on the employment of people with disabilities. And we succeeded in convincing the European Commission to do that. And what that has meant is governments, when they submit their plans to Brussels, because they have to submit them, and they must include a section as to what they are going to do to address the whole issue of disability. In our case, we saw that opportunity and we said, what we really need is a national disability strategy. So instead of just, you know, doing a little bit over here on education and doing a little bit over here on early intervention and a little bit over here on employment, why don't we have a strategy that's looking at all areas and that will roll over time? Because as I said earlier, this is not, there's no quick fix here. It's not going to get sorted quickly. So, and governments like to have plans and they like to be able to say, we're doing something about this. Rome wasn't built in a day, that's true, but Rome was built. And what we're talking about here is something that's going to take years, not months. And having a strategy that's clearly thought out and thought through and that is linked to various elements. So, you know, somebody said to me many years ago, you really should start talking to parents about employment and disability when the child is born, at the very outset. Paint that picture of a bright future, a career down the road. Unfortunately, many parents are told, take your child home and do your best and don't expect too much. That's not what I was told when I had children. You know, you want the best for your children. You're hoping that your children will be extremely successful. So it's not a good idea to be telling people, parents, at the very beginning, don't expect too much. So how do we have a strategy that goes across the lifespan for people with disabilities? I mentioned strategic alliances. The obvious group are organizations of people with disabilities, not organizations for people with disabilities. Yes, you can work with those, but organizations of people with disabilities. So we have a number of organizations here which are of disabled people themselves. Many of those are for physical disability, but we also have one for intellectual disability. There are mental health groups of some of those people call themselves survivors of the mental health service. So who are those groups of people with disabilities, and how have they organized themselves, and how can we work with them? Because I think you'll find that you'll have a lot in common with them. The social partners. So we've worked very effectively with employer organizations. We've several national employer organizations here. And again, working with them as a partner, bringing solutions to the table. We've also worked with the trade unions, and they again have been really powerful advocates for more fairness and for more equality around the employment of people with disabilities, and have had a number of projects themselves trying to teach their members about supported employment and how they can, in a practical way, support these ideas within businesses and within companies. Parents groups I've mentioned. As I said earlier, the vast majority of parents, in fact, I think every parent I've ever met, what they want is the best for their child. Now, sometimes what they think is the best may not be the most up to date, but how do we work with parent groups to educate them, to get them to understand? You are listening to this lecture, and you'll listen to many other lectures before you qualify, and you'll have had many opportunities to educate yourself, to read, research, to listen to people like me and others. Most parents don't get those opportunities. And yet we arrive at their doorstep or in their homes, or we invite them into a meeting, and we expect them somehow to just accept all this and to figure it out as they go along. So how do we work with parent groups to up their knowledge, to improve their skill, to help them to have better expectations in terms of actually what's possible for their children? Because when they get on board, they're very powerful. You know, a lot of times when I went to speak with politicians, I'd bring a parent with me, because at the end of the day, I don't have a child with disability. I don't have to live that every day. Parents do. And there's nobody more powerful than a parent sitting beside you, if you're with the Prime Minister or the Minister for Finances I have been with, who, you know, tell their story, because it's extremely powerful, but it's also extremely important. So how do you work with those parent organizations and parent groups out there? The special education sector, unfortunately, I don't know about in Turkey, but here, special education doesn't see employment as being high on its agenda. And we've tried to work with our Department of Education to say, you have an important role to play here. If you look at the United States, one of the key aspects of special education is what's called transition planning. And that's a whole focus on getting young people ready to leave school for the labor market. And the school system is actively involved in things like work experience, internships, job placements, while kids are still at school, in order to start getting not just the kids, but also their families to think about what kind of job opportunity might they start with when they leave school. And of course, service providers. I spent most of my career as a service provider. We're not all bad. There are many good providers out there who actually want to change, who want to do better, who want to provide the best possible supports they can to people with disabilities. One of the things, just moving on, that we did here, I mentioned the National Disability Strategy, which we have and we still have today. But we also, as part of that, we said we need a specific strategy around employment and disability, because that's such a big issue. And we have not done well with this. We need a strategy, and we now have what's called the Comprehensive Employment Strategy for people with disabilities. Why do you need something specific to employment? Well, here are the reasons. On virtually every indicator, people with disabilities fare worse than others. Poorer education, low workforce participation, and double the risk of poverty. Obviously, there's a direct relationship between your level of education and the kind of work you're going to get in later life. And unfortunately, and it's still the case in many countries, many people with disabilities do not get the same educational opportunities. So we're back to equality here. I remember being in Peru when I met the Ministry for Education, and they said, oh, but we haven't figured out how to address the education of kids without disabilities. So when we have that done, we will come back and then we'll look at disability. And I was saying, no, that is the wrong approach. You need to be looking at education for all children. And some of those children will have disabilities. And yes, you will need some targeted supports in there. But if people don't get a good education, then they're always going to struggle with the labor market, or they will end up in low paid work within the labor market. And obviously, if you have no job and you're going to have a life of relying on state benefit, then you're probably going to have a lifetime of poverty. Lack of accessibility to the workplace and restricted participation are also key factors. How do you unblock all these obstacles? So there's different obstacles in the way of the employment of people with disabilities. And the first one is, does work pay? I mentioned the benefits trap. In this country, for many years, you were actually penalized if you had a disability, because the first thing the state would do would be remove any benefits you had if you indicated that you could go to work, because the criteria for disability benefit was inability to work. So we had to do a lot of convincing of the civil servants in particular to say, no, this is not the same as open employment. I know it looks like that because they're in the open labor market, but they had to have support and they continue to need support. So supported employment is something different. And therefore, you need to be more flexible about how you address the whole benefits issue. That took quite a bit of work and quite a bit of time. But thankfully today, we have a more flexible benefit system that allows work to pay. One of the things I say to politicians is, somebody may be intellectually disabled. That doesn't mean they're stupid. If I go out today and get a job and start to work, and I'm going to be financially worse off, then I'm not going to do that. So it doesn't make sense to penalize people because they're actually trying to get off benefits. So you've got to work with them and do that on a phased basis. Are there jobs available? For many years, we were teaching people things like woodwork and skills that when you looked at the labor market, we don't have those kinds of jobs. So we were teaching people, for instance, to sit on production lines. Now we have some of that left, but a lot of that kind of work we don't see anymore. We are a service economy. So one of the things that's good about supported employment, because you have to start with placement, the first thing you have to be able to do is find the jobs. So you look at the labor market, and we're looking at the time, we may not have time to look at how you do that, but you have to look at the labor market and see, where are the jobs opening up? Where are the opportunities? And yes, of course, in this country, there are lots of people in high-tech companies. We have Google here, and we've PayPal, and we've Microsoft, and all those kind of massive multinational companies. They also need people to do, you know, admin work, cleaning work, gardening, canteen work. There's all kinds of things. There are still all kinds of jobs out there that many, many people with disabilities are able to do. Another question you've got to ask yourself is, do skills match available jobs? So employers are not going to employ people, and we don't want them to employ people just because they have a disability. We have to be able to teach people the skills that they need in order to do the job well. One of the big selling points from supported employment to employers is we guarantee that the job will get done. So we will ensure if the person with disabilities cannot do the job day one, the job coach will finish it. So the job always gets done. Another barrier or obstacle is, do employers know enough? For many employers, in my experience, when they hear the word disability, they think this is going to be a problem. It's going to cost me money. And in some countries, they're entitled to have that view, because in Germany, for instance, and I know in the UK for many years, although I think it's changed there now, there was a penalty if you're an employer of a certain size and you didn't employ people with disabilities, you had to pay a fine to the state. And the state would then use that money to pay for the shelter workshops. So what was the message to an employer? The message was, this is something that's going to cost you money that you have to just take your money and give over. So we tried to change that narrative with employers and say, actually, why don't you just employ the people? Because it will be a win-win situation. We can help you to find the right person for your company. We will help you to identify the job. We will come to work with the individual. We will ensure that the training is done to the standard that you set, and we will be there in the long term to provide ongoing support. Employers are not stupid. That's a good deal. And thankfully, my experience is when you do this well and you do it properly, many, many, many employers are happy to engage with that. Is disability being accommodated? I mentioned it's now law here that employers are required to make reasonable accommodation, but sometimes they just don't know how to do it, or they don't know what's involved. So again, job coaches are able to assist and give ideas and proposals around that. And then another one is their transport to work. This is particularly important for people with physical disabilities if they're using wheelchairs, for instance. Thankfully now in Ireland, we are beginning to have low-floor buses and more accessible transport, at least in the cities, not in the rural areas for sure. But you may have the skills to get to work, but if you physically can't get there because you don't drive and the public transport system is inaccessible, then yet again, there's another barrier. So all of those things are things that we need to be thinking about. And here we're back to the bigger picture. If you're really trying to make a difference, not just for one person, but for people with disabilities generally. Our employment strategy has 5 key pillars in terms of our disability employment strategy. And the first one is make work pay and remove the benefits trap. As I said, we've made some very, very good progress in that area. Equip people with disabilities to compete in today and in tomorrow's labour market. So most smart businesses are looking at what's coming down the track. What is the employer of tomorrow going to want? What kind of skills are they going to need? And how do we ensure that we're staying up to date with those things? Enlist public and private sector employers. So a lot of the emphasis here, interestingly, was on the private sector and private companies. And as I said, things like penalties and quota systems, etc. And one of the things that we were successful in doing was to say to our political people, well, what are you doing about it in the public system? Why aren't government departments employing people with disabilities? We have a really, really good project now. One of the last things I did before I retired, and I'd been working on this for years, was to convince our parliament to set up a project which is an internship program within the Irish Parliament for people with intellectual disability. So every year now, we have 10 young people with intellectual disabilities who go to the Parliament building, and they are there for 12 months, for a full year. And they work in different areas, some in the members' dining room, some on the cleaning crew, some bringing, letters and documents from one section of the Parliament to another, to offices, a whole range of different jobs. So we have, as I said, 10 people every year, and we have 2 staff who are based there as job coaches. And that has had a profound effect on the political people, because they're meeting people with intellectual disabilities every day that they're in the Parliament. They're seeing them do work, they see them in the canteen, they become acquainted with them, and it breaks down this stigma of us and them. More importantly, what it's done is really open up the public sector. Now, that is an internship program. We're not looking for those 10 people to remain. In fact, we don't want those 10 people to remain beyond the year, because we want 10 new people to get into the Parliament for their internship. So it is an internship program. However, because we have been involved with the Parliament and because it's a government-led initiative, all of the government departments have now started to understand that and are engaging now in opening up opportunities within the government departments for people with not just intellectual disabilities, but all kinds of disabilities. So that has been a really, really effective tool, and something, it's called the OWL project. It's based on, again, an American approach called Project Search, which is now being used not in governments, but in companies across the United States. We were quite deliberate, and I think we are the first I think the Irish Parliament is the first parliament in the world to do this, to actually have an internship for people with intellectual disabilities in the Parliament. And as I said, having them in there every day is making a huge, huge difference. So don't forget about the public sector, is what I'm saying, as well as the private sector. Prevent the flow into inactivity. So at the moment, so many young people go to a special school, are segregated, and then leave that segregated facility and go directly into a sheltered workshop or an activity center, and continue on the road to segregation. So how do we work more with school leavers, and how do we break that cycle of segregation and try and start their adult life with an exposure to the labor market? Because once somebody gets a job, they may lose it, or it may not work out, but having been there, then people start to say, well, we need a different job, or we need a better job, or we need to just start the process again. So try to break that cycle of segregation in terms of school leavers. The other one are people acquiring a disability. So we've had quite a good project here for people with traumatic brain injuries. So there are people who have car accidents or who develop a progressive condition who already had jobs. And unfortunately, too often we say, oh, you won't be able to go back to work. Well, why not go back and say to that company, well, maybe the person can't return to the job that they used to do, but there is other work within your business that we can work with you to support that person so that they can return to some form of employment. So we need to have a systematic process of engagement then with people with disabilities. Lots of people with disabilities go on disability benefit, go into a segregated program, and then they never really come across anybody again who's trying to help them find a job. So how do we have more of a systematic way of engaging with people with disabilities in order to help them find work? Underpinning this strategy, we're saying we need to move on all of these fronts together. So you can't say, well, we'll do the benefits trap this year, and we'll talk to schools next year, and we'll do something else the following year. You've got to be working on all of these things at the same time. And that's why you need a strategy and not just a series of separate activities. So move on all fronts together. Match the scale of intervention to the scale of the problem. This was something we had to really work hard with the government on, saying, look, this is a big problem. If there was any other group in society where we were telling you that there was an 80% unemployment level, you'd be saying, this is a scandal. Something has to be done. And you wouldn't just throw a small amount of money at it. So having the strategy was one thing, but we also needed to get a budget, which thankfully we were successful around, saying, you've got to make a significant investment in supported employment. So I mentioned the National Supported Employment Programme. It started many years ago now with a budget of €4 million. And within 1 year, I think they doubled the budget because they could see that it was working. So success breeds success, but also you can't just be tinkering around the edges. If you have a very, very big problem on a national level, then small interventions are not really going to cut the mustard. You've got to have a substantial intervention, as I said earlier, that's likely to take a fair amount of time in order to get this done and provide for diversity. We need to develop a best-in-class approach. So one of the things we've tried to do when I was running an organization for people with disabilities was say to staff, we need to be the best in class. We want to be up there with what are the new ideas, what are the right approaches, what is the best that we can be. And that's something we should always strive for. People with disabilities need us. They need us to have that approach. It's not good enough to be okay. We need to be as good as we can be. provide leadership with solutions. I've mentioned this, I think, several times now. So are you going to go out there and be passionate and provide the leadership and also provide the solutions? Because it's very important to be able to show good examples and demonstrate the capacity of this model. Advocate rights for all. So not just, as I said, when you come to those strategic alliances, we're saying all people in society have rights, and people with disabilities are just one of the groups. So how do we ensure that we are working for a society that is more inclusive for all people? Be more customer driven. As I said, we're really being challenged with that now. If I come back for a moment to, I mentioned chairing the task force for government on personal budgets. It really does change the dynamic. And I say this as a former chief executive. If I'm sitting in front of new parents in my organization who are coming into my office with the budget in their bank account saying, okay, Mr. Lynch, we've been given this budget from the state for our son, and we're considering sending our son or our daughter to your organization. Now, can you please explain to us what we will get if we invest our personal budget in this organization? That is a very, very different conversation than arriving in my office and me saying, this is what we offer, take it or leave it. Now, while I would never be that blunt, for many parents, that's what they will tell you is their experience. As one mother said to me, I was asked to do a consultancy job to evaluate a service. And this mother was, she was so unhappy with what she was getting. And she was very unhappy with how her daughter was being treated. And I said to her, well, why did you come to this organization? And she said, well, these are the best. The others are much worse than this. That is not good enough. Parents should not be driven to that. And so having a more customer approach and seeing families and seeing the individuals with disability as our customer as against our clients is a very different emphasis. And as I said, changes that dynamic quite significantly. Review all current provision. No government is going to just find all new money and leave everything that's currently there in its place and then find all new money to do this. So what we actually need to do is to take a more critical look at what's being spent on disability in your country. Where is the money going? If I was in government, and thankfully I'm not, but if I was, and somebody like Christy Lynch, me, came in and started telling me I needed to spend more money, the first thing I would say is, what are you doing with the money that you already have? And unfortunately, we spend a lot of money on disability. People say to me all the time when I was working, we have no money. Well, they did have money. They had a lot of money, actually, but we were spending it on the wrong things. We were spending it on segregation. And if we want, and this has been my experience, if we want government to listen to us, then we need to be able to say, we've started to use our money differently. And here's some progress that we've made. And if you could support us more, then we could make more progress. So if we want government to change, one of the ways to get them to change is to show what the change looks like. And by starting the pilot projects and building on those projects, you're able to then bring evidence that says, this is not what we currently do. This is different to what you're spending most of your money on, but look at the results this is achieving. So there is no easy answer here. You have to look at what we're currently doing. Now, in there lies a problem. I made a lot of enemies while I was working because people were saying I was trying to take their jobs away from them. I wasn't, because we will still need all the staff. We still need all the money. We just need to do it differently. But don't be surprised if people don't all see it that way. And there are lots of people who will be saying, oh, it's fine the way it is, leave it alone. But usually they're not the people with disabilities who are saying that. So how do we review what we're currently doing? Don't forget the difference that one person can make. I think it was Rose Kennedy who made that quote, I'm not sure. But really one person can make a huge difference. And sometimes that's all it takes. It takes one person with an idea like this to start talking about it and telling people about it. So when you leave this lecture and you're out with your friend. Well, you probably won't be out of your friends if it's like here and you're socially isolating because of COVID. But never, you know, miss an opportunity to tell a different story and to tell that positive story, excuse me, about people with disabilities in order that we start changing that mindset within society. So get involved if you can. I said I'd say a little bit about schools. I'm just looking at the time here, Sarap, and I'm going to stop and let people ask questions. But just 2 more slides, I think. One, inclusive education. There is a direct link between inclusive education and supported employment. Supported employment in the United States grew out of inclusive education. So they had started on kids with disabilities in regular schools way, way back in the 70s. And when those kids came to leave school, parents were told, your kid now should go to the special center. And they said, well, my kid has never been to a special center. They went to regular school and they got support to be there. And that's how supported employment was born. So there's a direct link there, or there should be a direct link between inclusive education and supported employment. Schools have an important role, as I said, in terms of creating expectations. The first time I went to, in my own organization, we had 2 special schools. And the first time I went to meet the staff in the special schools, they told me I was in the wrong place because I started talking about employment. And this teacher stood up and said to me, do you realize you're in a special school? And I said, well, of course I realize I'm in charge of the bloody thing. But anyway, that's not what I said. I said, well, yes, why are you asking me that? And she said, because these kids will never get a job. Now, if you have teachers who are special education experts who are of that view, then don't be surprised that those people don't get a job. If they're being told from the time they were very, very young, don't expect to get a job, you're not going to get one. Or maybe it's not as blunt as that. It's usually more subtle, like, oh, there are nice workshops or there are nice centers where people like you can go. We have to change that expectation. Support transition. I mentioned in the US, there are now formal transition programs that bridge that gap between school and adult services or work. We ran a very successful project some years ago called the Bridge Project. The idea being there needs to be a bridge that gets you from the school system into a good adult life. And hopefully that will be in a supported job. And an effective preparation for adulthood. So how do schools ensure that young people coming out of school actually have a CV, have had some work experience, and have some ideas about what type of work, at least initially, they would like to do. So that means schools need to have more of a focus on employment, and that's a hard sell. Believe me, I've been in many a conversation about that one with Department of Education. Formal transition planning, as I said, it really should be part of the curriculum, not just an add-on. Closer links with adult services. So if you go back to that idea of a bridge, the whole idea of transition is that while children are still at school, the adult services starts to have a little bit of involvement with the school system, even though they're still in the school system. And the other side of that coin is after kids leave school, the school system will continue to have some little involvement with the adult services who have, if you like, taken over. So how do you make that bridge work with closer linkages? And ultimately, you know, in order for teachers to get on board, you need the Department of Education to come on board, because I don't know about in Turkey, but here our education system is highly, highly regulated, and the curriculum is extremely regulated and defined. So in order to get schools really to embrace this, you need the Department of Education, who are responsible for the curriculum, to understand why it is that schools should be thinking about employment. It is now coming up my time to 8:30, so I think that means it's like 11:30 in your time. So I'm going to stop, Sarap, if you can hear me, and open this to questions. I think we have about 15 minutes left.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it, and you gave very new concepts also, new terminology. And I think Feryal Hoca get noted these also. I noticed. We catched everything. Thank you very much for your. And we can open for discussion to our students and to our visitors. And I think Aylin Hanım is already Dr. Aylin Çiftçi, are you, I have seen a visitor, Aylin, I don't know whether she's Dr. Aylin or another visitor. If it is if she is Dr. Aylin, please you can indicate. No, not okay. So maybe we can have questions from our teachers, participants, and we already have our supported employment association director Ali İhsan Bey here. Maybe he can give some words, and Feryal Hoca also is the member and the organization. She's among the head of the organization of this employment association. Maybe you can give some words about our.
Yes. First of all, this is the very nice meeting for us because we worked a lot. I can calculate approximately 7 years or 8 years.
8 years.
8 years, and we started in Yeditepe University for the participation, the workshops, Mr. Christy Lynch. It was the great time for us, and after that we worked on the European Union project on job coaching approaches and supported employment approaches. On this way, we learned a lot of valuable information, and he is always a good mentor, good, very excellent colleague for us, and he is always excellent teacher. And today also we learn a lot, and so it's amazing. And again, he achieved increasing our ambitions and exciting on this job coaching approaches and supported employment approaches. This is the very exciting time for me. And also, so we are together with the students now, and so I can say as a summary, as the physiotherapist, actually, firstly, we believe in this concept. So this is also our occupy as the physiotherapist, working on the people with disabilities, because our purpose for the disabled people is to improve the quality of life and developing any chances for social inclusion. And then, so this is the very essential purposes for us. And so the first thing we have to start, we can start from the first level to improving our belief, the supported employment approaches. And then as the case manager, we are also case manager, we are working case manager for our patients. We can try to, for the collaboration with the parents and the other partners. That's why first thing we need for inspiring and ambitions for social inclusion, and then the job coaching approaches is the very valuable intervention, or very valuable, very very important, essential way for us for the social inclusion approaches, for the social inclusion purposes. So as I understand, as I say, this is the summary from the speech of Mr. Christy Lynch. Thank you again for your excellent and dynamic and very valuable speech, Mr. Christy.
Serap Hocam, ben söz alabilir miyim izin verirseniz? Hello, Christy again.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And you?
Apologies, I had to wake up your son to get this to work.
No, it doesn't matter. We apologize for you because three hours before, from Turkey.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your grateful presentation and lecture. Every time you are excellent in this area. And I have a question, please, Christy. How COVID-19 pandemic affected disabled employees in your country or sports employment in this period?
I think, well, the same way as it's affected everybody else. As you know, I'm retired now, so I'm not directly involved. Sure. But Ireland has taken, I think, a very careful approach to COVID-19. We have had 2 complete lockdowns. So the first time everything closed down, construction, schools, absolutely everything. The government, on the positive side, have introduced very good financial supports, both to business and to employees. So I suppose the good news is anybody who was working and who had to stop working were paid a payment from the state because of COVID-19. So there's a COVID payment now, and if you were working, you will be paid that. So people with disabilities will be included in the same way as everybody else. We have just come out of a second lockdown. This time it was not as it still was quite restrictive for a lot of people, but the schools stayed open, for instance. So the first time everybody was, I suppose we've learned more about COVID. The first time we thought that children were spreading COVID, and now we're being told no, children are not super spreaders. So all of our schools have stayed open for the second lockdown, and construction sites stayed open in the second lockdown. So there are more places open, but still, like hospitality is completely closed and has just reopened last week. As you probably know, Ali, lots of our people are working in hospitality. So they will have been laid off like everybody else in that industry. But the good news is, if they were, they will have got a payment from the state to compensate for the lack of earnings. And also, there's a big drive on the government side to make sure that people who lost their jobs during COVID will be re-employed. Now, some companies will not survive this. Some companies will go out of business. We know that. But the strategy here already, even though we have not yet started to use the vaccine, but we will in January, the strategy already, the government is saying that by 2023, we will be back to full employment. And again, and I know we have a different economy. Again, I have long conversations about the Turkish economy now, and I know it's different here, but there is an opportunity, because the fact that the government are saying we want to get back to full employment, well, full employment means, it should mean, including people with disabilities. And we need to make sure, as this huge focus will now come on trying to get the economies back, that is an opportunity for us to get in that door and say, listen, don't make the mistake again. Don't forget about disability. Include it as part of this drive to put the economy back on track. Obviously, those people who were working and those companies that reopen, then the job coaches need to be ready to be back and to ensure that people with disabilities who were working in the company can go back to work. But my experience is, not so much with COVID, but in other situations, usually the employers have developed a relationship with the disabled person, and they want them back. It shouldn't be a major problem. You know, once things get back up and running and business is back moving again, if the person was working well, why would they not have them back? They will have them back.
Thank you very much.
And I can see Feride Hoca.
Can I say some words, Serap Hocam? Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Thank
I'm good.
you. Oh. As a mother, I want to say a few sentences. Thanks to trained coaches, we had to deal with minimal problems in our son's supported employment process. And this minimized the problems we had at home, of course. Participation of a disabled young person in business life is very valuable for himself and his family. Our quality of life has improved. Thank you, Christy. Really thanks you, and of course our coach. Now Tolga is unemployed, but I hope we will find a new job in future. Also, thank you very much for the wonderful hosting he gave to our other son. Thank you.
Size bir ekleme yapabilir miyim konuşmana izin verirsen?
Yes, evet,
Christy, Tolga had been working for a construction and a project company for 7 years.
Yeah.
But the company decided to close the company at the end of this year. That's why Tolga is unemployed at the moment.
Yeah.
Maybe little bit explanation needs for talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the reality is this, yeah.
Yes, but two things here. He now has 7 years of successful employment.
Yeah,
And,
really.
And you
Absolutely.
like, I want to also say thank you, because I was looking at the lectures and I see Tolga is now one of the stars in Turkey, because I saw his story in one of the presentations. But no, seriously, that is important. We need those examples, and you need those examples. But the difference now, 7 years later, is he has 7 years of a track record of being a very good employee for that company, and therefore you have that, he has that reference and that experience. The other thing is, sometimes, you know, never waste a good crisis is an expression we have in English. Maybe after 7 years he needs to do something different. He needs a different type of job. I was talking to Engeli, and he was saying he loves football. One of the very first supported employment examples I saw in Spain was a young man with Down syndrome who worked for Barcelona Football Club because he loved football. Yeah. So, you know, I'm not saying it has to be that, but really what you know, it's not theory for you and your family. You've had the experience. As his mom just said, it made a difference to Tolga, and it made a difference to your family life. So you've done this before. Now you need to start the process again. But you're starting from a much better position now because you have the experience. Yes, absolutely right. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And I'm sorry, Serap Hocam. Christy, definitely right, because Tolga say me and her mother, his mother, I went to work for Fenerbahçe Club. How can I get to Fenerbahçe Club Stadium from here? He's asking about this question.
Well, yeah, I didn't get to talk about employers, but just a very quick, then you start to think about, do you know anybody in that club? Do you know anybody who knows somebody who works there? Are there any connections that you can open up a conversation? Could he go there for a work experience, even if it's not paid work, at least for a couple of weeks? Just get him through the door. Is that possible? And if it is, fantastic. If it isn't, there are other things, or are there other aspects of, I mean, I know he also likes games and gaming and stuff like that. So what are the things that are really important to him? And start coming up with a list of possibilities. That's all they are at this point. And then starting to think about your own network, not just who you and your family know, but who do your relations know, and who are the, you know, how do you widen that net and that networking to see if you can open up some opportunities for a new position for him. Thank you.
So dear students, in this way you had seen a live parent and job coach interaction. and a good lecture for parents.
I'm just looking at the time here. I'm retired, so I have plenty of time, but I realize the students don't. But I just wanted to say thank you to Turkey. As you know, I've traveled all over the world, and sometimes I don't go back to a country. And the reason I don't go back is because if people don't do something, then I think it was a waste of my time. The reason I went back to Turkey so many times was because of you people, because you actually took these ideas and you made it happen for people with disabilities. And you started with your small project and you built and you built. And here we are 8 years later, and you now have a university course, and you have more examples, and you're building, and you will get there. You absolutely will get there. And I have stopped doing these lectures, but because it was Turkey, I agreed. And I'm always happy to help in whatever any way I can if you think I can be of assistance. I mentioned the personalized budget.
Actually, we have 3 universities.
Good, very good. I think that's probably more than we have at this stage. But I mentioned the personalized budget. Okay, and I was about to say, hopefully when COVID passes, I will get to come back.
Yes, we will be very much happy. You will be our host. Yes, we will be very much happy. And we have Didem Hoca from Health Sciences University and Engeli also. But will you please let me, because students may leave for their lectures. They have questions. Let us give some time for questions if they have, and we can continue because I believe we have more time. We can continue the meeting with. Thank you. So, do you have any questions? Anas, you always have questions. You are giving me a hard time. Why you are not giving hard time to Christy also?
Hello again. Thank you so much, Professor and assistant and all the doctors that contributed to this amazing course. For me, unfortunately, I didn't take as an elective course, but after this lecture, I think one more time for this. Yeah, and thank you so much, Professor Christy, for this amazing course. I learned a lot of things about the job coaching and how can we provide the chance for the disabled people to have job and to integrate in our community. And especially, I will talk about myself because in Iraq, you know, I'm from Iraq, and we have a lot of disabled people, and I think we didn't progress anything, or we didn't progress in job coaching, and we have a lot of problem in our community and for our government, and I think we need to work more on this issue. And now I realized how important the job coach is. And for my question, you are an occupational therapist, right, Professor?
Yeah, I once was an occupational therapist.
For me, this question also came to my mind. What are the responsibilities for physiotherapists in the field of job coaching, and what is the difference? What is the difference? Sorry, between the physiotherapist and the occupational therapist? How they can integrate with each other and work, let's say, in the job coaching field?
Good question. Yes, like certainly when I worked as an occupational therapist, the whole approach was a multidisciplinary approach. So I have worked over my career with psychologists closely, with physiotherapists closely, with speech and language therapists closely. And sometimes it's actually, it may even be just coincidence that it's one of those disciplines who hears about this model and takes the lead and promotes the approach. So for me, what's critical is that somebody gets the idea and starts to do something with it. I think, as one of the previous speakers said there, like, what are you trying to do as a physiotherapist, or indeed as an occupational therapist, is to promote maximum function. and to ensure that the person can function within society as much as they can. It seems to me, you know, if we can do that in a way that is an inclusive way, rather than saying, okay, I've worked on your lower limbs, or I've worked on your mobility, and I've really helped you to improve your mobility, but your life is a very boring, uninteresting life. Is that success? Was that a good outcome as a physiotherapist or as an occupational therapist? No, you're nodding your head. I agree, it's not. So it's about how do we use the skills that we have as therapists in a way that's more holistic. And sometimes that will involve working more closely, well, it should involve working more closely with other disciplines. But also don't forget, I mean, I wouldn't like this to be taken over by only therapists and professionals. Don't forget about families and parents and working collaboratively with them as well. And I mean, you mentioned, you know, a lot of problems in your own country. Again, that's not unusual. I mean, lots of countries are actually every country in the world, and I've been to very, very many places, not Iraq, I have been to Iran actually, but most places I go, people are struggling with this issue. If it was easy to fix, we would have fixed it a long time ago. So what's important is, you know, in your country, you now have this information, you now have this knowledge. How do you find some other people who either know about it already? If they don't, then you teach them, or start reading up some materials. And if it's coming from a physiotherapist, great. If it's coming from an occupational therapist, great. Or if it's coming from a family who has a kid who hears about this and wants something better. It's about bring together as many people as you can from as many backgrounds as you can, because yeah, there are differences between a physio and an OT. We come at things from different perspectives, but neither perspective is right or wrong. They're just different. And bringing those different knowledges together ultimately means a better outcome for the individual with disability at the end of the day. So the more we can bring better perspectives, better understanding, better knowledge, the better. Because as a physiotherapist, you know, if I'm trying to teach something on the job, for instance, you may be able to look at a movement and say, actually, what needs to happen here is this kind of intervention from a therapeutic point of view, and that will allow the person to do the job much more effectively.
Thank you so much, Professor. Last question I have. What's your advice for us as a young physiotherapist?
My advice? I always go with Nike's advice. You know Nike?
Yeah.
And you know what their slogan is?
Yeah, it's like...
no, that's the logo. The slogan is just do it.
Just do it. Just do it.
Yes, you're right.
That's my advice. Just do it.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. I will give the other chance for the other student to, if they have any question.
Because success breeds success. On a serious note, if one person starts to do it, even in a very small way, then you're able to use that example to convince people that more people should do it.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Anas. What about the other students? I'm sure there are some questions and comments on Christy's speech. Do we have any questions? I can see many students. They are not, I think. Okay. Then maybe we can continue with the Didem Hoca. Didem Hoca, since students are preferring to be silent and listen, so we can listen to you. You're welcome.
Serap Hocam, Feryal Hocam, and Christy, dear Christy, thank you. I'm very glad to see you again and listen you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for your valuable presentation. I have no question. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christy, Elif is a teaching staff now. She's doing her PhD. Finished her, sorry.
Graduated. Gained the PhD title in this year, in this month.
This month, I think 3 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Yes, she's going to be a PhD, a position as
Doctor.
PhD soon. Yes, doctor. Yes, she's doctor, and she will have the position soon. If
Fantastic.
that doesn't give, we will give, right? Didem Hoca, both of our universities, if KARE-Retired doesn't give the position, we can give. Or maybe, Christy, you can give a position in Ireland.
Actually, I also, since I last was with you, the University College Dublin also made me an honorary professor.
Oh, you are our professor.
Yeah.
Oh, very nice. So, congratulations.
Congratulations.
That was very nice, very nice.
Ah, yes.
Congratulations,
Congratulations.
Christy.
Make enough to congratulate this. Yes, very nice. You're welcome.
And, hi, Christy. I hope you are well.
I'm good. How are you?
And we are fine, thank you. As you know, we have the challenging time due to the coronavirus disease, and we don't have any shutdown, but of course we have some limitations in our everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for your valuable information again, and we have learned so much from you, and we try to improve ourselves and with your support. And thank you for your presentation today also.
You're very welcome, and congratulations on your about to be new appointment.
Thank you, thank you.
Nice, very nice. Burcu, would you like to give some comments on you are the host and you organized this, you supported me a lot in organizing this meeting.
Yes, I will thank you too for Christy for the presentation. Just any question or something
from students? Do we have any? No, not
no,
yet.
No, not yet.
Okay. Right. I think some of our students left because they have lectures, and if I have time, and if our group has time, and students, and Christy, since you are retired, we
I have
assume
lots,
that you have
lots of time. Okay, listen.
Yes, while sorry, Burcu, we forgot to give. But still, we have the certificate. Burcu prepared the certificate for you, but we forgot to give you while we had around more than 30 students, 30 people. But still, we can give. Sorry for that. So yes, this is.
Bravo. Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christy.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And look,
and we appreciated all of our teachers and guests for their presence in the.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and it was so nice to see you all again and hear you all again. And as I said, if you need to come back to me, let's just set up another meeting.
Yes, thank you. We'll be very
Thank you, and good morning.
Thank you very much, Christy.
Thank you.
Serap Hocam çok teşekkür ederiz size de. Harika bir toplantıydı.
One more thing, Christy. Okay, anyway.
Ben Ege'yi arayayım, Ege'ye söyleyin.
This lecture, it's already copied, recorded, and will be in our lecture page. But also,
yapamıyorum onu.
We want to put the lecture site, not the project site, the lecture site. I think on YouTube. So because it was it was another activity of the university, but we can copy this project site also and share both of them, the lecture site and project site, share with you personally. In this way, we can keep our records. And the students who are interested with the project, they are very much welcome. They are very much welcome. and they are welcome for our
Other
association,
universities.
for university and association also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much Serap Hocam. Excellent meeting.
Biraz dinlenelim şimdi. Çok güzel oldu.
Sağ olun, elinize sağlık.
Çok teşekkürler.
Teşekkürler.
Hocam,
Biz sizi yeniden kazanmış olduk.
Evet,
evet, çok